Okay, I just want to do a quick thing with chapter 4. We'll go into greater depth next week. Um, these are the notes I would put on a board if we were in school. Took a picture from when I've done it in the past. Um, what I do is I graphically organize sort of the events. And when we look at this, we see that all the events in this chapter take place either in World War II or in Billy's midlife. Um, I'd mentioned to you that, or one of the things we'll look at more closely, is that at the beginning of the chapter, Vonnegut uses all of his sort of literary tactics, his devices, his recurring imagery when he's talking about Billy shuffling along. There's the metafiction of him drunk dialing Billy at the beginning on his daughter's princess phone. And then we have this movie going backwards thing right before he's kidnapped by aliens. But what does that do at the beginning of the chapter? Um, One of the things it does, because it's metafiction, is remind us that this story is fictional, right? And that this is a construction. This is a writer, as he said at the beginning in chapter 1, somebody who traffics in climaxes and characterization and conflict and all of those things. Uh, and there is this issue that he highlights between how do we know what's true, and of course the war stuff, as he said, is true. So this whole timeline, which goes in order, are real events, even if the names are changed. There may not be somebody named Roland Weary, but these characters, even especially Wild Bob, and the reference to the fact that um, was sorry, Vonnegut and O'Hare were on in this same group with Billy. These highlight the true parts of the story. But what is true? Vonnegut's experience. What if it is in contrast to the historical narrative? If you read a history book and Dresden is not in there, uh, which it wasn't for a long time. Part of the reason it isn't there is because of this book. But he highlights the fact that you have to remember this is fiction. He undermines his own authority. So and then he ties things together. One of the things Billy asks is, why me? And the aliens say there is no why, and part of that is the way that they view time, which is all time, and each moment is like a bug trapped in amber. But the same question, why me, is reflected um, when, sorry, somebody gets, one of the American soldiers, I don't think it's in here, um, gets punched for saying something by a German soldier, and he says, why me? And the soldier says exactly what the aliens say, but with a German accent. By me, by anybody, right? There is no why, is what the aliens say. We also have Roland Weary, who is dying of gangrene from the shoes he got, which he just got because his captors, the Germans, needed the shoes, and he happened to be a jackass, so they took his shoes. But he makes this whole narrative, personal narrative, not a grand narrative, but this whole story for himself, this fiction that Billy Pilgrim killed him, and he can't die. He doesn't want to die pointlessly with no story, so he demands to be avenged. He creates this narrative, which is something that would bother Mary O'Hare because he is building a story about himself where he died nobly in war or he was betrayed by someone. All of that's better than I had to give up my shoes, I got gangrene, and I died from blood poisoning. All right, we have Billy's coat, which kind of tells a story of itself with the holes. It's a civilian's coat. We'll come back to these in greater detail later. We have this weird information, this omniscient information of who has the best body and the worst body. It's seemingly irrelevant as telling us that Valencia had her, she had a hysterectomy, which is at the beginning. Um, Things that seem off topic, we'll talk about that later. And this scene ends with them going to the showers to be disinfected, and we pop into infant Billy, but we end with the statement. We come back to this purely fictional part. There is no doubt, right? So he highlights that he's writing a novel, and that means that some element of the truth has to be bent toward fiction. And then he has the aliens give us this sort of philosophy, and this is what I was talking about um, in the postmodern thing, the idea of free will to the aliens who see things, um, who see time all at once. is ridiculous. All right. So I just wanted to point out how sometimes the chapter's theme, which we'll talk about later, but you might already see it sort of emerging, can be discerned by looking at the sort of key um, plot points and looking at which storyline we're focused on in the chapter. So there's nothing after the war. There's not really much on Tralfamadore, although he is in transit there. He's also in transit here. Right? There's a parallel to this. He's captured. He's been captured. He's being taken to a prison camp. And he's been taken to Tralfamadore. I'm going to stop here.